Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we start, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Today's story is about a billionaire who lost faith in love, until his maid did the unthinkable. Let's get into it. The crystal decanter shattered against the marble wall, sending shards of glass and 20-year-old scotch cascading across Adrian Kane's study like fragments of his former life. "Get out," he growled at the trembling woman standing in his doorway, her uniform pristine despite the chaos surrounding them. "I told the agency no female staff. Ever." Elena Rivers didn't move. She should have run. Any sane person would have fled from the dark fury radiating from the man behind the massive mahogany desk. But something in his eyes stopped her cold. Not anger, though that was there too. Pain. Raw, devastating pain that seemed to echo from every corner of this opulent prison he called a mansion. "Mr. Kane," she said softly, her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm not here to hurt you." Adrian's laugh was bitter as broken glass. "That's what they all say. Hey beautiful souls, wherever you're watching from tonight, whether you're curled up in London, getting cozy in a small town, or stealing a quiet moment in the city, I'm so glad you're here with me. How are you doing tonight? And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, you're going to want to do it now because this story is going to take you on an emotional journey that will change how you think about love, trust, and second chances. Trust me on this one." Elena took a careful step into the study, her eyes taking in the destruction. Overturned furniture, scattered papers, and photographs that had been torn in half and thrown across the floor. One photo caught her attention. A beautiful woman with platinum blonde hair and a smile that looked calculated even in still frame. Her arm linked with a younger version of Adrian, who actually looked happy. "The cleaning agency said you've gone through 17 housekeepers in 6 months, Elena continued, bending to pick up the photograph despite Adrian's sharp intake of breath. "They also said you pay triple the normal rate. Money fixes everything, doesn't it?" Adrian's voice was ice. "Or haven't you heard? I'm Adrian Kane. I buy whatever I want, whenever I want it. Including people?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Elena watched Adrian's face cycle through surprise, rage, and something that might have been respect before settling back into cold indifference. "Everyone has a price," he said finally. "Even naive little maids who think they can fix broken things." Elena carefully placed the torn photograph on his desk, her fingers lingering on the image of his former happiness. "I'm not here to fix you, Mr. Kane. I'm here to clean your house." "Same thing." "No." Elena met his gaze directly, unflinching despite the way his dark eyes seemed to strip away every pretense. "Fixing implies something is broken. Cleaning just means removing what doesn't belong." For the first time since she'd entered the room, Adrian Kane was speechless. Elena began collecting the scattered papers, her movements efficient but gentle. "The agency told me you prefer to be left alone. That you work from home and rarely leave this estate. That you have trust issues with women. And yet here you are. Here I am." Elena straightened, holding a stack of contracts that probably represented more money than she'd see in 10 lifetimes. "Because I need this job, Mr. Kane. Desperately. And because sometimes the people who say they want to be left alone are the ones who need someone around the most." Adrian studied her with the intensity of a man who'd learned to read people like stock reports, looking for the angle, the hidden agenda, the inevitable betrayal. But Elena Rivers seemed exactly what she appeared to be. A woman in her late 20s with warm brown eyes, calloused hands that spoke of honest work, and a stubborn chin that suggested she wouldn't be easily intimidated. "What makes you think you'll last longer than the others?" he asked. "Because I'm not trying to save you," Elena replied, moving to the window to assess the damage to the curtains. "I'm just trying to survive." Something in her tone made Adrian look up sharply. There was a story there, hidden beneath her calm exterior. Pain that recognized pain. Survive what? Elena's hands stilled on the fabric, and for just a moment, her composed mask slipped. "That's my business, Mr. Kane. In my house, everything is my business. Then we understand each other." Elena turned back to face him, and Adrian caught a glimpse of steel beneath the softness. "I clean your house, you pay me what was promised, and we both keep our secrets." Adrian Kane had built an empire worth $12 billion by reading people, by knowing exactly what they wanted and how to use it against them. But this woman, this maid who'd walked into his sanctuary uninvited and unafraid, was a puzzle he couldn't solve, which made her either very dangerous or exactly what he needed. "Fine," he said, settling back into his chair with the predatory grace of a man accustomed to winning. But there are rules. I assumed there would be. No questions about my personal life. No attempts at conversation beyond what's necessary. No touching anything in my private study or bedroom. And absolutely no mention of this job to anyone outside these walls. Elena nodded. And your rules for yourself? What? If I'm not allowed to ask personal questions, then you're not allowed to try to intimidate me with your wealth or your reputation. Elena's eyes held his steadily. Deal. No one had spoken to Adrian Kane like that in 3 years. Not since Victoria had smiled at him over champagne and promised to love him forever before taking half his heart and all his faith in human decency with her when she left. You have no idea what you're walking into, Adrian said quietly. Neither do you, Elena replied. As she left the study to begin her work, Adrian stared at the torn photograph on his desk. The image of himself before betrayal had taught him that love was just another transaction and trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. But something about Elena Rivers made him wonder if he'd been wrong about everything. And that terrified him more than any hostile takeover ever could. Elena had been cleaning Adrian Kane's mansion for exactly 3 days when she discovered the room he'd forbidden her to enter. It wasn't his bedroom or private study. Those were clearly marked as off-limits. This was different. A door at the end of the east wing that remained locked, with fresh flowers placed outside it every morning by Adrian himself. She was polishing the hallway when she heard him talking through the thick oak door, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. I know you'd hate what I've become, Victoria, Adrian murmured. You always said I was too trusting, too willing to see the best in people. Ironic, isn't it? Elena froze, her cloth suspended mid-wipe. Victoria, the woman from the torn photograph. The new maid is different, Adrian continued. She's not afraid of me, which makes her either very brave or very stupid. I can't decide which. Elena backed away from the door, her heart pounding. She shouldn't be listening. But there was something heartbroken in Adrian's voice that made her chest ache with recognition. Mr. Kane, the sharp voice belonged to James Freeman, Adrian's head of security, and the only other person who lived on the estate full-time. Sir, you have a call from Tokyo. Elena quickly resumed her cleaning as James appeared in the hallway, his granite features softening slightly when he saw her. Elena, right? James had been kind to her from the beginning, perhaps recognizing something in her careful movements and watchful eyes that spoke to his own protective instincts. How are you settling in? Fine, thank you. Elena had learned that James was former military, fiercely loyal to Adrian, and worried about his employer in ways that went far beyond professional duty. He's not usually. James gestured toward the locked room, searching for words. Mr. Kane wasn't always like this. Before Victoria, he was different. Generous, trusting. He funded scholarships, built hospitals, actually believed people were inherently good. What happened? Elena asked quietly. James's expression darkened. She took everything. Not just money, though she got plenty of that. She took his ability to trust, his faith in love, his belief that someone could want him for who he was rather than what he could provide. How long ago? 3 years. The day before their wedding. James shook his head. Found her in bed with his business partner, planning to take half his assets in the divorce. They'd been working together for months, building a case for emotional distress and Adrian's alleged psychological manipulation. Elena felt sick. She was going to frame him? For being controlling and abusive. Would have worked too, if Adrian hadn't come home early from his bachelor party. James studied Elena's face. That's why he doesn't trust women now. Why he goes through housekeepers like tissues. Most of them try to seduce him or steal from him within a week. And the ones who don't, he finds reasons to fire them anyway. Safer that way. Elena absorbed this information, understanding finally dawning. Adrian Kane wasn't cruel, he was terrified. Every harsh word, every cold dismissal, was armor against the kind of devastation Victoria had inflicted. James, Elena said carefully, why are you telling me this? James was quiet for a long moment. Because you're the first person in 3 years who's looked at him like he's still human instead of just a bank account with legs. And because, he hesitated. Because I think you understand what it's like to be betrayed by someone you trusted. Elena's breath caught. What makes you say that? The way you check every exit when you enter a room. The way you flinch when people move too quickly. The fact that you applied for this job using a false last name. Elena's blood turned to ice. I don't know what you mean. Elena Moreau, James said gently. Not Rivers. daughter of the late Senator Robert Morrow, heiress to a political dynasty worth $200 million. Missing for 8 months after your fiancé David tried to kill you. The hallway seemed to spin around Elena. She'd been so careful, so thorough in creating her new identity. How had he? I'm former CIA, James explained, reading her panic. Background checks are my specialty. The question is, does David Crawford know where you are? Elena sank against the wall, all pretense crumbling. David Crawford, her former fiancé, the ambitious prosecutor who'd been using her father's political connections to build his career. The man who'd tried to push her off a hotel balcony when she'd discovered he was taking bribes from the criminals he was supposed to prosecute. I thought I was safe here, Elena whispered. I thought if I became nobody, if I disappeared completely. He's still looking for you, James said. Made it look like you had a breakdown and ran away. Your family believes you're having some kind of psychological episode. Because that's exactly what David told them. Elena's hands shook as she remembered that night. David's charming smile turning deadly when she'd confronted him about the money transfers. The way he'd grabbed her, the feeling of falling, the miracle that a balcony ledge had caught her instead of letting her plummet 20 stories. If you've ever felt like you were running from something that seemed impossible to escape, drop a comment below. Sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest, and finding the courage to start over takes everything we have. Does Mr. Kane know? Elena asked. Not yet. But Elena. James's expression was serious. Adrian Kane is a lot of things, but he's not a man who tolerates threats to people under his protection. If David shows up here, he won't. I've been careful. You've been desperate, James corrected gently. There's a difference. Desperate people make mistakes. Before Elena could respond, Adrian's voice echoed down the hallway. James, where's that call from Tokyo? Coming, sir. James turned back to Elena. I won't tell him who you really are. But Elena, you need to think about whether hiding behind a false name is protecting you or just postponing the inevitable. As James disappeared into Adrian's study, Elena remained in the hallway, staring at the locked room with its daily flowers and wondering how two people could be so broken by betrayal yet still capable of such devotion. That evening, Elena was finishing the kitchen when Adrian appeared in the doorway, a tumbler of whiskey in his hand and exhaustion written across his features. You're working late, he observed. The silver needed proper polishing. It hasn't been maintained correctly. Adrian leaned against the doorframe, studying her. Most people would have taken shortcuts. I'm not most people. No, Adrian agreed quietly. You're not. They stood in comfortable silence, the kitchen warm with the scent of the dinner Elena had prepared and left in the warming oven. She'd noticed Adrian barely ate, surviving on coffee and whatever James forced on him. The food smells good, Adrian said finally. You should eat some. James says you live on caffeine and stubbornness. James talks too much. James cares about you. Adrian's expression shuddered. James is paid to care about me. No, Elena said firmly, turning to face him fully. James is paid to protect you. Caring is something else entirely. And what would you know about caring? The question was meant to wound, but Elena heard the genuine curiosity beneath it. I know that caring means showing up even when someone pushes you away. It means bringing flowers to a locked room every morning. It means protecting someone's secrets even when they're too proud to ask for help. Adrian went very still. You don't know anything about that room. I know that whoever Victoria was, she's gone. But you're still here, still breathing, still capable of kindness even when you try to hide it. Elena stepped closer, close enough to see the way Adrian's carefully controlled mask was slipping. I know that survival isn't about avoiding pain. It's about choosing what's worth fighting for. And what are you fighting for, Elena Rivers? The false name hung between them like a lie that was becoming too heavy to carry. Elena looked into Adrian's dark eyes and saw her own pain reflected there. The knowledge that trust was a luxury they couldn't afford, that love was a weapon their enemies had already used against them. The chance to be someone other than who I was, Elena said finally. The same thing you're fighting for. Adrian set down his whiskey and moved closer. Close enough that Elena could smell his cologne mixed with the faint scent of the flowers he placed outside Victoria's room each morning. And if I told you that everyone who gets close to me ends up destroyed, I'd tell you that everyone who gets close to me ends up dead. The words slipped out before Elena could stop them, raw and honest and more revealing than anything she'd intended to share. Adrian's eyes widened. Elena, I should go, Elena said quickly, grabbing her cleaning supplies. "It's late." But as she moved past him, Adrian caught her wrist gently. His touch was warm, careful, nothing like David's crushing grip that night on the balcony. "Elena," Adrian said quietly, "whatever you're running from, you're safe here. I give you my word." Elena looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up into his eyes. For the first time in 8 months, she almost believed it was possible to be safe again. "Good night, Mr. Kane," she whispered. "Adrian," he corrected. "Just Adrian." As Elena left the kitchen, she could feel Adrian watching her go. Neither of them knew that 3,000 miles away, David Crawford was hiring a private investigator to track down his missing fiancée. And neither of them knew that their carefully guarded secrets were about to collide in ways that would change everything. Elena was arranging fresh orchids in the mansion's foyer when the news report stopped her cold. The search continues for Elena Moreau, daughter of the late Senator Robert Moreau, who disappeared 8 months ago following what sources describe as a psychological breakdown. Her fiancé, prosecutor David Crawford, has announced a substantial reward for information leading to her safe return. Elena's hands trembled as David's face filled the television screen. Still handsome, still charming, still the man her family believed was desperately searching for his missing fiancée out of love rather than a need to silence the only witness to his crimes. Elena has been struggling with severe depression and paranoid delusions following her father's death, David said into the cameras, his voice perfectly calibrated to convey heartbroken concern. "We believe she may be using an assumed identity and working in domestic service. If anyone has seen a woman matching her description." Elena's photograph appeared on screen, the official portrait from her father's Senate campaign, where she looked polished and political, and nothing like the woman who now cleaned Adrian Kane's mansion in simple clothes with her hair pulled back and no makeup. But it was still recognizably her. "Elena!" Adrian's voice behind her made her spin around, her face white with terror. He stood in the doorway of his study, his expression shifting from confusion to sharp concern as he took in her panicked state. "What's wrong?" Elena fumbled for the remote, frantically trying to turn off the television, but Adrian had already seen enough. His eyes moved from the screen to her face, recognition dawning with devastating clarity. "Elena Moreau," he said quietly. "Not Rivers. I can explain. You're the senator's daughter, the missing heiress." Adrian's voice was carefully controlled, but Elena could see the walls slamming back into place behind his eyes. "How much?" "What? How much is he paying you?" Adrian stepped closer, his expression turning cold. "Crawford? The media? Whoever sent you here to get close to me." Elena felt the world tilting around her. "Adrian, no, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." Adrian's voice was ice-wrapped in silk. "I'm such an easy mark, aren't I? The broken billionaire who can't trust women, so damaged that he'd never suspect the sweet little maid who just happened to show up at his door. That's not what this is." "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like Victoria's playbook. Get close, gain trust, document everything for maximum damage." Adrian pulled out his phone. "How long before the cameras arrive? How long before I'm front-page news as the man who kidnapped a senator's daughter? I'm not here to hurt you." Elena's voice cracked with desperation. "David Crawford tried to kill me. I'm hiding from him, not working for him." Adrian paused, his finger hovering over his phone. "Try again. 3 years ago, my father discovered that David was taking bribes from organized crime figures he was supposed to be prosecuting. Dad was going to expose him, but then he had his heart attack." Elena's voice broke. "David made it look natural, but I knew. I found the evidence Dad had been gathering. So you confronted him. On our engagement night, David had just announced his run for state attorney general, using my father's political connections and my family's money." Elena wrapped her arms around herself, remembering that night with crystal clarity. "When I showed him the evidence, he smiled. And then he tried to throw me off our hotel balcony." Adrian went very still. "Tried. I caught the ledge. Hung there for 20 minutes until hotel security found me." Elena met his eyes. "David told everyone I'd had a breakdown, that I'd tried to hurt myself because I couldn't cope with Dad's death. My family believed him because I had been struggling. Grief and depression are easy covers for attempted murder. And you've been running for 8 months. Hiding. Working jobs where no one asks questions, staying off the grid." Elena gestured around Adrian's mansion. "This was supposed to be perfect, a live-in position where I could disappear completely." Adrian studied her face with the intensity that had made him billions, looking for tells, for cracks in her story. But Elena had learned to spot lies in the faces of politicians and prosecutors. She recognized truth when she heard it, and more importantly, she recognized when someone else was recognizing it too. "The reward David announced," Adrian said slowly. "How much?" $5 million. Adrian's expression shifted. "For a missing person case? For a witness elimination case?" Elena pulled her phone from her pocket, showing Adrian a news article she'd bookmarked months ago. "David's been systematically destroying everyone who might have known about my father's investigation. 3 suicides, 2 accidents, 1 random mugging. All people who worked with Dad. Jesus Christ." Adrian scrolled through the article, his business mind immediately grasping the implications. "Elena, if this is true, it is true." Elena's voice was steel. "And if David finds me here, he won't just kill me. He'll destroy you too, because you'll be a witness to whatever story he creates about my death." Adrian set down her phone, his expression unreadable. Elena waited for him to call security, to have her removed, to protect himself the way any sensible billionaire would when faced with this kind of liability. Instead, he stepped closer. "Elena," he said quietly, "look at me." She lifted her eyes to his, expecting to see suspicion or calculation or the cold dismissal she'd grown accustomed to from powerful men who saw her only as a political asset. Instead, she saw fury. Not at her, but for her. "That bastard hurt you," Adrian said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge she'd never heard before. "Adrian, no one will hurt you again. Not while you're under my protection." The words hit Elena like a physical force. Protection. Not just safety, not just employment, but the kind of fierce personal commitment that meant Adrian Kane was choosing to stand between her and David Crawford despite the massive risk to himself. "You don't understand what you're saying," Elena whispered. "David has connections everywhere. Political allies, law enforcement contacts, media relationships. He could destroy your reputation, your business. Let him try." Adrian's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Elena, I'm worth $12 billion. I own senators, judges, and half the media outlets in this country. David Crawford is a small-time prosecutor with big-time ambitions and a trail of bodies behind him. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't." Adrian cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the steel in his voice. "Elena, someone tried to murder you. They're still hunting you. They've killed 7 people to cover their tracks." His thumbs brushed away tears she didn't realize were falling. "If you think I'm going to let that stand, you don't know me at all." Elena stared into Adrian's dark eyes, seeing something she'd thought was lost forever. A man willing to fight for her not because of who her father was or what her family could provide, but because she mattered to him as a person. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for me?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his hands still framing her face. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because 3 days ago, a woman walked into my house and wasn't afraid of me. She saw pain and didn't try to exploit it. She offered honesty when everyone else offers lies." Adrian's forehead touched hers. "Because for the first time in 3 years, I remember what it feels like to want to protect someone instead of just protecting myself." The moment stretched between them, intimate and terrifying and charged with the electricity of 2 people recognizing something unexpected in each other. Then Elena's phone buzzed with a text that made her blood freeze. "Asterisk found you, baby. See you soon. D asterisk." Elena's hands shook as she showed Adrian the message. He knows. He knows I'm here." Adrian read the text, his expression turning deadly. "James," he called, his voice carrying through the mansion. James appeared within seconds, taking one look at Elena's terrified face and Adrian's protective stance, and immediately shifting into military mode. "Sir?" "Full security lockdown. Now." "And James?" Adrian's voice was quiet, but absolutely lethal. "Someone just threatened my family." Elena's heart stopped at the word family. Not employee, not staff, not even friend. "Family. What do you need me to do?" James asked, his hand already moving to his concealed weapon. "Everything," Adrian said, his arm sliding around Elena's waist. "We're going to war." As alarms began sounding throughout the mansion and security systems engaged, Elena realized that her careful plan to disappear had just exploded in the most spectacular way possible. But for the first time in 8 months, she wasn't facing the danger alone. And Adrian Kane, she was beginning to understand, was a man who played to win. even when the stakes were life and death. The first sign that David Crawford had arrived in Adrian's world came at 3 a.m., when every security camera on the estate simultaneously went dark. Elena jerked awake in the guest suite where Adrian had insisted she stay, her heart hammering as emergency lighting bathed the room in red. Through her window, she could see the outline of armed figures moving through the gardens with military precision. Her door burst open, and Adrian appeared in tactical gear that looked disturbingly natural on him, a pistol in his hand and James right behind him. "Time to go," Adrian said, his voice calm despite the chaos erupting outside. "How many?" Elena asked, already reaching for the emergency bag James had prepared for her. "8 that we can see," James replied, checking his weapon. "Professional military contractors." Crawford didn't come to negotiate. Adrian helped Elena into a bulletproof vest, his hands steady and sure despite the gunfire that had just erupted from the direction of the main gate. "Elena, I need you to listen to me very carefully. We're going to the safe room in the basement. You'll be protected there while James and I—" "No." Elena's voice was steel. "I'm not hiding while you put yourself in danger because of me. Elena, this isn't negotiable." "Yes, it is." Elena grabbed Adrian's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles as he fought between protecting her and letting her choose. "Adrian, David didn't just bring contractors. He brought media, FBI contacts, probably a judge with a warrant claiming I'm mentally incompetent and need to be returned to his custody." Adrian's expression darkened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying if you fight this like a war, David wins. He gets to paint you as an unstable billionaire who kidnapped a senator's daughter. But if we fight it like a chess game—" Elena met his eyes. David's not the only one with powerful connections. James was monitoring communications through his earpiece. "Sir, we've got news vans pulling up outside the gates. FBI vehicles too. How the hell did they coordinate this so fast?" Adrian demanded. "Because David's been planning this for weeks," Elena said grimly. "He knew I was here before he sent that text. This whole thing, the reward announcement, the media coverage, even the location leak, it's all been choreographed." Adrian stared at her, understanding dawning. "He wants this to be public. He wants me to look like the villain, while he looks like the heroic fiancé rescuing his mentally ill beloved from a dangerous man." Elena pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen. "But David made one crucial mistake." "Which is?" "He assumes I'm still the same broken woman who fell off that balcony 8 months ago." Elena's smile was sharp as broken glass. "He has no idea who I've become." Elena pulled up a secure app that James had helped her install, one that connected to networks David couldn't trace or intercept. Her fingers flew over the screen as she accessed files she'd been building for months. "Elena, what are you doing?" Adrian asked. "Something I should have done a long time ago." Elena looked up at him, her eyes fierce with determination. "I'm going to destroy David Crawford. Publicly. Tonight." "How?" "By giving the media a better story than the one he's selling." Elena's phone connected to a secure server, and she began uploading files, financial records, recorded conversations, photographic evidence. Everything she'd gathered about David's corruption and the murders he'd committed to cover it up. "Elena," James said urgently, "we've got movement on the south perimeter. They're trying to breach the—" An explosion rocked the mansion, sending books tumbling from Adrian's study shelves. Through the windows, Elena could see flames rising from what had been the security gate. "Jesus Christ," Adrian breathed. "They're not here to arrest you. They're here to eliminate everyone who knows the truth." Elena's blood ran cold as the reality hit her. "David's not planning to take me back. He's planning to kill me and make it look like you did it." "Sir," James's voice was sharp with urgency, "we need to move. Now." But Elena was already moving toward Adrian's private study, toward the secure communications system she'd noticed him using for his international business calls. "Elena, what are you doing?" "Fighting back." Elena's fingers flew over Adrian's computer, accessing his business network. "Adrian, you said you own senators and judges. I need you to call them. All of them. Right now. In the middle of the night? During an armed assault? Especially during an armed assault." Elena pulled up news feeds on multiple screens, showing live coverage of the rescue operation at Adrian Kane's estate. Look, the news reports were exactly what Elena had predicted. Billionaire holds senator's daughter hostage and FBI attempts rescue of missing heiress and Adrian Kane's dark obsession with political dynasty . David's controlling the narrative in real time, Elena said. But he's made one fatal assumption. Which is? Elena's smile was cold as winter. That Adrian Kane doesn't have the resources to fight back. Adrian stared at the screens, then at Elena, then back at the chaos erupting around his estate. When he looked at her again, his expression was one of fierce admiration mixed with something that looked like love. "Tell me what you need," he said. The next hour was a masterclass in the kind of power that only vast wealth and political connections could wield. Adrian worked his phone like a conductor directing an orchestra, calling in favors from senators, judges, FBI directors, and media moguls, while Elena coordinated the release of evidence that painted David Crawford as the monster he truly was. "Senator Williams, it's Adrian Kane. I need a federal judge pulled out of bed, and I need it now. I don't care if he's in Martha's Vineyard." "Judge Morrison?" "Adrian Kane. Someone just tried to assassinate me and a witness under my protection." "No, I'm not being dramatic. Director Hayes? You have agents on my property, right now operating under false intelligence." Meanwhile, Elena was uploading David's financial records, recordings of him ordering hits on her father's associates, and most damning of all, security footage from the hotel that night showing David attempting to push her off the balcony. If you've ever watched someone fight back against impossible odds using nothing but truth and determination, you know the feeling of electricity in the air. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to choose between hiding from your problems or facing them head-on. These stories matter. "Elena," James appeared at her side. "The contractors outside are pulling back." Something spooked them. Elena looked at the news feeds, watching in real time as the narrative began to shift. The evidence she'd released was spreading across social media faster than David's people could contain it. Hashtag Justice for Elena was trending. Hashtag David Crawford Killer was gaining momentum. "Adrian," Elena called out, "we need to get ahead of this. David's going to try one final play." Adrian finished his call and moved to her side, studying the screens. "What kind of play?" Before Elena could answer, her phone rang. David's number. "Don't answer it," Adrian said immediately. "Actually," Elena said, her voice steady, "I think I should. But not alone." She looked at Adrian, seeing understanding pass between them. Trust. Partnership. The recognition that they were stronger together than either could be alone. Elena answered the phone and put it on speaker. "Hello, David." "Elena, baby." David's voice was sickeningly sweet, the same tone he'd used when they were engaged. "You've caused quite a bit of trouble tonight. Not nearly as much as you're about to face." David laughed. "Oh, sweetheart. You really think your boyfriend's money can protect you from me? I have federal agents, Elena. I have judges. I have. Had. Elena corrected. Past tense, David. Because right now, every major news outlet in the country is running footage of you trying to murder me. Every social media platform is sharing evidence of you taking bribes from organized crime. And every federal agency you've been corrupting is distancing themselves from you as fast as possible." The silence on the other end of the line was telling. "You're lying," David said finally, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Check the news," Elena suggested. "Or better yet, check your bank accounts. I imagine they're being frozen right about now." Adrian was watching Elena with something approaching awe. This wasn't the terrified woman who'd been hiding in his mansion 3 days ago. This was Senator Moreau's daughter, a woman who'd grown up in the corridors of power and knew exactly how to wield it. "Elena," David's voice was getting desperate. "You don't understand what you're doing. The people I work with will abandon you the second you become a liability instead of an asset," Elena finished. "Which happened about 20 minutes ago when I released recordings of you bragging about killing my father." Another silence. Longer this time. "I'll destroy you," David snarled. "I'll destroy both of you." "No," Adrian said, speaking for the first time. "You won't." "Who the hell is this?" "Adrian Kane." "And David?" Adrian's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "You just threatened the woman I love. In my house. On a recorded line that's being monitored by federal agents who are no longer on your payroll." Elena's heart stopped at the words "woman I love," but she forced herself to focus on the call. "You have no idea what you're up against," David said. "Actually, I do," Adrian replied. "I'm up against a small-time prosecutor who got greedy, killed the wrong people, and just made the mistake of threatening someone under my protection. David, I've destroyed hostile takeovers bigger than your entire operation before breakfast. This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Elena said quietly. "David, look outside." Through the phone, they could hear movement, shouting, the sound of vehicles. Elena, what did you do? What I should have done 8 months ago, Elena said. I fought back. The line went dead. Elena and Adrian looked at each other across the desk, both breathing hard from adrenaline and the intensity of what they'd just accomplished. Elena, Adrian said quietly, when I said you were the woman I love, you meant it. Elena stepped closer to him, close enough to see the honesty in his dark eyes. I meant every word. Elena reached up and cupped his face in her hands, seeing past the wealth and the walls to the man underneath. The one who'd protected her, fought for her, chosen her over his own safety. Adrian Kane, she whispered, I love you too. When Adrian kissed her, it was with the desperation of a man who'd thought love was lost forever and the tenderness of someone who'd finally found something worth protecting. But even as they held each other in the aftermath of their victory, neither of them knew that David Crawford had one final card to play, one that would test everything they'd built together. The victory lasted exactly 12 hours. Elena woke in Adrian's arms for the first time, morning sunlight streaming through the windows of his private suite where he'd insisted she stay after the night's chaos. For a precious moment, she felt safe, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets and the warmth of the man who'd chosen to fight the world for her. Then she saw Adrian's expression as he stared at his phone. What is it? Elena asked, immediately alert. Adrian's face was white as parchment. Elena, we need to talk. He showed her the screen. A video message, sent from an encrypted account at exactly 6 a.m. Victoria Ashford, Adrian's former fiancée, smiled at them from the screen, her platinum hair perfectly styled, her blue eyes cold as Arctic ice. But she wasn't in hiding or witness protection. She was standing in what looked like a penthouse office, confident and polished and very much alive. Hello, darling. Victoria's voice purred through the phone's speaker. Surprised to see me? Elena felt Adrian's body go rigid beside her. That's impossible. Victoria's been dead for 2 years. The car accident was very carefully staged, Victoria continued, as if she could hear his thoughts. Adrian, you always were too trusting, too willing to believe what people wanted you to believe. The camera pulled back, revealing a man standing beside Victoria. David Crawford, but not the desperate fugitive from last night. This David looked calm, collected, wearing an expensive suit and the smile of a man who'd been playing a much deeper game than anyone realized. Hello, Elena, David said. Did you really think exposing those financial records would stop me? Those were breadcrumbs, sweetheart, designed to make you feel like you were winning. Elena's blood turned to ice. Adrian. It gets better, Victoria said, moving closer to the camera. Elena, darling, did you ever wonder how a simple maid position at Adrian Kane's estate became available just when you needed it most? How the employment agency that hired you just happened to have an opening for someone with your exact qualifications? Adrian sat up abruptly, his mind racing. The agency. You recommended that agency, James. You said. I said what I was paid to say, came James Freeman's voice from behind them. Elena and Adrian spun around to find James standing in the doorway of the bedroom, his expression apologetic but resolute. In his hand was a pistol pointed directly at them. James, Adrian's voice was barely a whisper. What the hell is going on? I'm sorry, sir. I genuinely am. But this operation has been 3 years in the planning, and we're too close to the end to let sentiment interfere. Elena felt reality crashing down around her. Operation. The systematic destruction of Adrian Kane. Victoria's voice continued from the phone. You see, Adrian, when you ruined my first attempt to take half your fortune, I realized I was thinking too small. Why settle for half when I could have everything? Adrian's face was a mask of devastation and growing rage. You faked your death to, what? Plan some elaborate revenge scheme? Not revenge, darling. Justice. You humiliated me, destroyed my reputation, made it impossible for me to show my face in New York society. So I decided to destroy you the same way you destroyed me. David stepped closer to the camera. Elena was never supposed to fall in love with you, Kane. She was supposed to document your obsessive, controlling behavior. Gather evidence of your psychological instability. Create a pattern that would justify having you declared mentally incompetent. Elena felt sick. You're saying our meeting was planned? Every detail, Victoria confirmed. Your background as Senator Moreau's daughter was perfect. A woman from a prominent family, traumatized by her father's death, vulnerable to the influence of a wealthy, powerful man with a history of problematic relationships with women. Adrian was staring at Elena, his expression cycling through disbelief, betrayal, and something that looked like his heart breaking in real time. "Elena," he said quietly, "please tell me you didn't know." "I didn't," Elena said desperately. "Adrian, I swear to you, I had no idea." "Really?" Victoria's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Elena, darling, what did you think happened to your father?" Senator Robert Moreau, the man who was about to expose political corruption at the highest levels of government. Elena's world tilted. "My father died of a heart attack." "Your father died because he discovered our operation," David said. "He found out about the network we'd been building, the connections between organized crime and political prosecution. He was going to expose everything. So we stopped him," Victoria added casually. "A simple injection during his weekly doctor's visit. Mimicked a heart attack perfectly." Elena couldn't breathe. You killed my father?" "We eliminated a threat," David corrected. "Just like we eliminated his associates when they got too curious. And just like we would have eliminated you, if you hadn't proven so useful." Adrian was studying Elena's face, looking for any sign that she'd known, any indication that her shock and horror were performance rather than genuine reaction. "Elena," Adrian said carefully, "the timing of when you appeared at my door. 3 days after Victoria's anniversary." Elena's hands shook as she read the documents. David had somehow convinced a judge that she was mentally incompetent, that her disappearance and erratic behavior, following her father's death, constituted a psychological breakdown requiring immediate intervention. "The evaluation will determine whether longer-term commitment is necessary," the officer continued. "Your fiancé is very concerned about your well-being." Fiancé. Elena felt sick. In the 2 weeks since Adrian had thrown her out of his life, David had been systematically reconstructing the narrative, painting himself as the devoted partner trying to save the woman he loved from her own mental illness. And the worst part was that Elena was no longer sure he was wrong. Since leaving Adrian's mansion, Elena's memories had become increasingly unreliable. Details about her father's death that she'd been certain of now seemed fuzzy. The night David allegedly tried to kill her felt more like a nightmare than a real event. Even her feelings for Adrian, the love that had felt so genuine, so life-changing, now seemed suspect. What if Victoria was right? What if everything Elena believed about herself was the result of psychological conditioning she couldn't even remember receiving? "I need to make a phone call," Elena said desperately. "You can make calls from the facility." As the officers escorted her from the motel room, Elena caught a glimpse of the news playing on the lobby television. Billionaire Adrian Kane under federal investigation for securities fraud. Her heart stopped. "Wait, what's that about?" The officer glanced at the screen. "Some big financial scandal. Guy's supposed to be worth billions, but turns out he's been cooking books for years." Elena felt the world spinning around her. Adrian was being investigated? This had to be Victoria's next move. Destroying his business empire the same way she'd destroyed his personal life. "Please," Elena said as they reached the patrol car. "I need to call him. Adrian Kane. He's in danger." "Ma'am, Mr. Kane is the subject of a federal investigation. Any contact with him would violate the conditions of your psychiatric hold." Elena was loaded into the back of the police car, watching the city blur past through reinforced windows, feeling more helpless than she ever had in her life. Meanwhile, across the city, Adrian sat in his mansion's ruins, staring at financial documents that proved his entire business empire was built on fabricated transactions and manipulated records. "Sir," his lawyer, Catherine Walsh, spread the evidence across his desk. "The federal investigators have documentation going back 5 years. Phantom companies, fake investment returns, manufactured asset values. It's comprehensive." Adrian studied the papers with the detached precision of a man who'd lost everything that mattered. "How is this possible? Someone with access to your financial systems has been systematically creating false records. Every legitimate transaction has been mirrored with fraudulent ones. Every real investment has been paired with fictional assets." "James," Adrian said quietly. "Almost certainly. Mr. Kane, your head of security, has had administrative access to every financial system you own. He could have been laying this groundwork for years." Adrian laughed bitterly. "So while I thought I was building a business empire, someone else was building my prison." "It's worse than that," Catherine said gently. "Sir, the psychological evaluation that was part of the investigation. They're saying your erratic behavior over the past 3 years, your isolation, your paranoia about women, It all supports a profile of someone suffering from severe mental illness. Let me guess. The kind of mental illness that would explain why I'd create elaborate financial fantasies and obsess over a senator's daughter I'd kidnapped. That's exactly what they're suggesting. Adrian stood and walked to the window, looking out at the estate that would soon be seized by federal agents. In the distance, he could see news vans gathering like vultures. "Catherine," he said quietly, "what are the chances this is all legitimate? That I've actually been mentally ill for years and just didn't realize it?" Catherine studied her client with concern. "Sir, you've been under tremendous psychological pressure. The isolation, the betrayal, the systematic manipulation you've endured. It's possible that your perception of reality has been compromised." So Elena could have been telling the truth about not knowing Victoria's plan, but still been manipulated into believing false memories about her own life. Or Elena could have been a willing participant who's now having her own psychological breakdown due to guilt. Or Elena never existed at all, and I've been talking to an actress for 3 months. Catherine was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Kane, have you considered the possibility that your feelings for Elena were genuine, regardless of how the relationship began?" Adrian turned from the window, his expression hollow. "What's the difference? If my love for her was real but based on lies, it's still worthless. If her love for me was manufactured through psychological conditioning, it was never real in the first place. But if you could prove that Victoria orchestrated everything." "How?" Adrian gestured to the evidence scattered across his desk. "Every piece of proof I might have gathered has been compromised. Every ally I thought I had was working for the other side. Every feeling I trusted was potentially the result of 3 years of psychological manipulation." Adrian's phone rang. An unknown number. "Don't answer it," Catherine advised. But Adrian was already picking up, recognizing that he had nothing left to lose. "Adrian," Victoria's voice purred through the speaker. "You sound terrible, darling. What do you want, Victoria?" "To offer you a choice. One last chance to save yourself from complete destruction." "I'm listening." "Confess to the financial crimes. Admit to kidnapping Elena Moreau during a psychological breakdown. Agree to seek treatment at a private psychiatric facility." Victoria's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Do that, and I'll ensure you're treated well. Refuse, and you'll spend the rest of your life in federal prison, wondering whether any of your memories are real. And Elena will receive the psychiatric treatment she needs to recover from the trauma you've inflicted on her. She'll eventually understand that her feelings for you were the result of Stockholm Syndrome and psychological manipulation." Adrian closed his eyes, thinking about Elena's face when he'd told her to leave. The devastation in her eyes. The way she'd begged him to believe that what they'd shared was real. "Adrian," Victoria continued, "you have 24 hours to decide. After that, Elena will be committed indefinitely, and you'll face federal charges that will destroy you completely." "Victoria?" "Yes, darling. When this is over, when you've taken everything from me, what then? What do you do with all that money and power when it's built on the destruction of innocent people?" Victoria's laugh was cold as winter. "I enjoy it, Adrian. Every single day." The line went dead. Adrian looked at Catherine, who'd heard every word. "Sir, if you confess to crimes you didn't commit, I'll save Elena from a lifetime in psychiatric care." Adrian sat heavily in his chair, feeling older than his 35 years. "Catherine, what if Victoria's right? What if I am mentally ill? What if Elena was never in real danger, and I've been projecting my own psychological damage onto her situation? Mr. Kane, what if the kindest thing I can do for Elena is disappear from her life completely?" As Adrian contemplated surrender, Elena sat in a psychiatric evaluation room 50 miles away, answering questions designed to determine her mental competency. "Elena," Dr. Sarah Morrison said gently, "you've described a conspiracy involving your deceased father, your fiancé, and a billionaire. You've claimed that your memories of traumatic events may have been artificially implanted. Do you understand how these statements might be interpreted?" Elena stared at the wall, no longer sure of anything. "That I'm delusional. That you're suffering from severe psychological trauma manifesting as paranoid ideation and false memory syndrome. And if I insisted that Adrian Kane was innocent, that Victoria Ashford faked her death to destroy him, I would consider that evidence of a complex delusion designed to justify your romantic attachment to a man who may have been exploiting your vulnerability." Elena felt something breaking inside her chest. Every rational explanation pointed to the same conclusion. She was mentally ill, had been for months, and everything she believed about Adrian, about their love, about Victoria's conspiracy, was the product of a damaged mind seeking to make sense of trauma. "Dr. Morrison," Elena said quietly, "what if I can't tell the difference anymore between what's real and what I've imagined? Then we help you rebuild your sense of reality. Slowly, carefully, with the support of people who love you. People like David Crawford. David has been advocating for your care every day since you disappeared. Elena, whatever you think happened between you, he's here because he loves you. If you've ever felt like you were losing your grip on reality itself, like you couldn't trust your own memories or feelings, you understand the terror Elena is experiencing. Sometimes the cruelest manipulation is making someone doubt their own mind. Share in the comments if you've ever had to fight to hold on to your truth when everyone around you said you were wrong." Elena looked through the window of the evaluation room at David Crawford, sitting in the waiting area wearing the expression of a devoted fiancé worried about the woman he loved. He looked so sincere, so genuinely concerned. If Elena hadn't lived through the terror of that night at the hotel, if she hadn't felt the genuine love in Adrian's arms, if she hadn't seen Victoria alive on that video call. But what if she hadn't lived through any of those things? What if it was all delusion, all trauma-induced fantasy designed to make sense of a reality too painful to accept? "Elena," Dr. Morrison said gently, "are you ready to consider the possibility that the people who love you are trying to help you heal?" Elena closed her eyes, feeling the last of her certainty crumble away. "I don't know what's real anymore," she whispered. "Then let us help you figure it out." As Elena signed papers agreeing to voluntary psychiatric treatment, and Adrian prepared to confess to crimes he didn't commit, Victoria Ashford stood in her penthouse office, watching news reports of both their surrenders. She'd won. Completely, utterly, perfectly. Adrian Kane would be destroyed, his fortune seized, his reputation ruined. Elena Moreau would spend years in psychiatric care, eventually emerging as a broken woman convinced that her love for Adrian had been a delusion. And Victoria would inherit everything, having orchestrated the perfect psychological destruction of two people who dared to find love in defiance of her plans. But Victoria had made one crucial miscalculation. She'd assumed that love, once broken, could never be repaired. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. Elena's moment of clarity came at 3 a.m. on her fourth night in Riverside Psychiatric Facility, when she overheard two nurses discussing a patient who'd been admitted the same day as her. "Poor girl," one nurse whispered outside Elena's room. 23 years old, completely dissociated from reality. Claims her boyfriend tried to kill her, but the medical records show clear evidence of self-harm. What kind of evidence? Defensive wounds on her hands that matched the glass she broke, but no fingerprints from anyone else. Security footage showing her alone in the room when she was injured. She's created this elaborate fantasy about being attacked, but it's textbook trauma response. Elena sat up in her narrow bed, her mind suddenly sharp with understanding. Medical records. Physical evidence. Documentation that couldn't be faked or manipulated through psychological conditioning. She'd been so focused on questioning her memories that she'd forgotten the most basic principle her father had taught her about investigating political corruption. Follow the physical evidence. The next morning, Elena made a request that surprised Dr. Morrison. "I want to see my medical records from the night at the hotel. All of them." "Elena, I'm not sure that's advisable. Revisiting traumatic events." "Dr. Morrison, if I'm delusional, then the medical evidence will prove it. If I'm not, it will prove that too." Elena met the doctor's eyes steadily. "Either way, I need to know." 3 hours later, Elena sat in Dr. Morrison's office staring at medical records that made her blood run cold. "According to this," Elena said quietly, "I was treated for a drug overdose, not injuries from a fall." Dr. Morrison consulted the files. "Yes, it appears you were found unconscious in your hotel room with high levels of sedatives in your system. There's no mention of a balcony or any kind of fall. And the injuries to my hands? Consistent with breaking glass while under the influence of sedatives. The hotel reported that you destroyed several pieces of glassware before losing consciousness." Elena felt her world reshaping itself around this new information. "Dr. Morrison, what if someone drugged me and staged the room to look like I'd had a breakdown? Elena, what if the memories I have of hanging from a balcony are false, but not because I'm delusional? What if they were deliberately implanted to make me believe I was in danger when I was actually being kidnapped?" Dr. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. "Elena, that would require an extraordinary level of sophistication and planning. It would require exactly the resources that someone like David Crawford would have access to. Elena pulled out her phone, which had been returned to her that morning. "Dr. Morrison, I need to make a call." "Elena, your communication restrictions are based on the assumption that I'm mentally ill. But if these medical records prove I was drugged and manipulated, then those restrictions are invalid." Elena dialed a number she'd memorized but hoped never to use. Her father's former chief of staff, Margaret Chen, the one person who might still have access to Senator Moreau's private investigation files. "Margaret, it's Elena. I need you to listen to me very carefully." 20 minutes later, Elena was looking at documents that Margaret had just emailed to Dr. Morrison's secure server. Financial records showing payments from David Crawford to a private medical company specializing in memory reconstruction therapy for trauma victims. "Jesus Christ," Dr. Morrison whispered, scrolling through the evidence. "Elena, according to this, David Crawford paid for experimental psychological treatment designed to implant false traumatic memories while erasing real ones." "The memories of my father's murder," Elena said grimly. "They made me forget that Dad was killed and replaced it with trauma about David trying to kill me. Trauma that would make me seem mentally unstable if I ever tried to expose the truth about Dad's death." "But why make you believe David was dangerous if he was the one behind it?" "Because they needed me to run somewhere safe. Somewhere David could control the narrative about my mental state while Victoria used me as a weapon against Adrian." Elena felt pieces clicking into place. "Dr. Morrison, I was never supposed to fall in love with Adrian. I was supposed to document his controlling behavior and then have a breakdown that would justify my removal to psychiatric care. And when you didn't follow the script, they improvised, made it look like Adrian had manipulated a mentally ill woman, while David played the concerned fiancé, trying to save me from a dangerous obsession." Dr. Morrison was studying the medical records with growing alarm. "Elena, if this is true, then you've been the victim of an elaborate conspiracy involving medical fraud, psychological manipulation, and murder. And the man I love thinks I was part of it." Elena's phone rang. Margaret's number. "Elena, honey, I found something else. Your father's insurance policy had a beneficiary clause that activates if you're declared mentally incompetent." Elena's blood went cold. "What kind of clause?" "David Crawford becomes the sole executor of your father's entire estate, including his investigation files and all evidence of government corruption. Elena, if you're committed long-term, David gets everything, including the evidence that could prove he killed Dad. All of it. Elena, you have to get out of there. Now." Elena looked at Dr. Morrison, who'd heard every word. "Doctor, I'm not mentally ill. I'm the victim of a criminal conspiracy, and I need to leave this facility immediately. Elena, even if everything you're saying is true, I can't just release you." The court order was obtained through perjured testimony and fabricated evidence. Elena was already moving toward the door. "Dr. Morrison, I'm leaving. You can call security, or you can help me save an innocent man's life. Your choice." Dr. Morrison stared at Elena for a long moment, then reached for her keys. "I'll drive you myself." 40 minutes later, Elena stood outside Adrian's mansion, her heart hammering as she looked at the "For Sale" sign planted in the front lawn. Federal agents were loading boxes of documents into trucks while news crews filmed from behind police barriers. Elena pushed through the crowd of reporters, ignoring their shouted questions, and found Adrian sitting alone on his front steps watching his life being dismantled piece by piece. "Adrian," she called out. He looked up, and Elena saw the exact moment when disbelief, hope, and pain warred across his features. "Elena." Adrian stood slowly, his voice careful. "You're supposed to be in psychiatric care." "I was. Until I found proof that everything Victoria told us was a lie." Elena pulled out her phone, showing Adrian the medical records, the financial payments, the evidence of David's conspiracy. She watched his expression change as he processed what he was seeing. "Elena," Adrian said quietly, "are you telling me that your memories of that night were artificially implanted?" "I'm telling you that someone drugged me, staged a breakdown, and then used experimental therapy to make me believe false memories while erasing the real ones." Elena stepped closer to him. "Adrian, I remember now. I remember my father being murdered. I remember David's real plan. And I remember that everything I felt for you was genuine." Adrian studied her face with the intensity that had made him billions. "How do I know this isn't another layer of the manipulation? How do I know you're not here because Victoria wants you to be?" Elena felt her heart breaking all over again. Because Victoria never counted on one thing. Which is, that love leaves evidence. Elena reached into her pocket and pulled out something that made Adrian's breath catch. The engagement ring he'd bought for her, the one he'd thought no one knew about. Margaret found it in my father's safe, Elena explained, along with a letter he wrote before he died, detailing David's crimes and Victoria's connection to them. Dad knew about the conspiracy, Adrian. He was trying to protect both of us. Adrian stared at the ring, then at Elena. Elena, I bought that ring the day before Victoria's video call. No one knew about it except your father-in-law, came a familiar voice. They turned to see James Freeman approaching, his hands raised in surrender, but his expression genuine for the first time since Elena had known him. Sir, James said to Adrian, I need to tell you something. Everything. James, if this is another. It's not. James pulled out a recording device. Sir, I've been documenting everything for 3 years. Every conversation with Victoria, every order from David, every manipulation they forced me to participate in. Adrian stared at his former head of security. Why? Because Senator Moreau hired me first. Before I ever worked for you, I was working for Elena's father, documenting David Crawford's corruption. When the senator was murdered, I was ordered to get close to you to continue the investigation. Elena felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. You were working for my father? I was working to get justice for your father. Elena, the night you disappeared from the hotel, I was the one who found you unconscious. I was the one who made sure you survived David's attempt to erase your memories completely. James looked at Adrian. Sir, I've been playing triple agent for 3 years, trying to protect both of you while gathering evidence to destroy Victoria and David. The engagement ring, Adrian said slowly. I photographed it and sent it to Senator Moreau's secure files, along with documentation of your genuine feelings for Elena. Evidence that your love for her couldn't have been manufactured, because it developed before Victoria's plan expected it to. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. James, why didn't you tell us? Because Victoria had to believe her plan was working. She had to think she'd broken both of you completely before I could move against her. James smiled grimly. But she made one crucial mistake. Which is? Adrian asked. She assumed that people who've been broken can't love each other back to wholeness. James handed Adrian a secure phone. Sir, I have federal prosecutors standing by, along with Senator Moreau's complete investigation files and 3 years of recorded evidence. Adrian looked at the phone, then at Elena, then back at James. What do you need us to do? Fall in love again, James said simply. Publicly, genuinely, permanently. Show the world that Victoria Ashford's weapon of choice, the destruction of trust, couldn't destroy something real. Elena stepped closer to Adrian, close enough to see the hope warring with caution in his dark eyes. Adrian, she said softly, I know you have every reason not to trust me. I know that everything we shared might feel contaminated by Victoria's manipulation. But the medical records prove that my memories of loving you are real. And this ring proves that your feelings for me developed independently of anyone else's plan. Elena, I love you, she said simply. Not because I was programmed to, not because I was manipulated into it, but because you're a man who chose to protect me when you thought I was just a maid with secrets. Because you fought for me when everyone else said I was delusional. Because you were willing to sacrifice your freedom to save me from psychiatric commitment. Adrian looked at the engagement ring in Elena's hand, then into her eyes. Elena, if we do this, if we fight back together, Victoria will try to destroy us both completely. Then we make sure we destroy her first. Adrian smiled for the first time in weeks, and Elena saw the man she'd fallen in love with emerging from behind the walls of pain and doubt. James, Adrian said, taking Elena's hand, make the calls. It's time to end this. As federal agents prepared for the largest coordinated arrest in financial crime history, and Elena slipped her father's engagement ring onto her finger where it belonged, neither of them knew that Victoria was watching from her penthouse, finally realizing that she'd made the one mistake that would cost her everything. She'd underestimated the power of love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger than ever. But the final confrontation was still ahead, and Victoria Ashford had one last card to play. If you've ever had to choose between trusting your heart or protecting yourself when everything seemed lost, you know the courage Elena and Adrian are showing right now. Sometimes love means taking the biggest risk of all. Let me know in the comments what you think about second chances and fighting for what matters most. The final confrontation took place exactly where it had all begun, at a charity gala, this time hosted by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to celebrate their new initiative against financial crimes. Elena stood beside Adrian in the ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, wearing a stunning midnight blue gown that made her look every inch the senator's daughter she'd been born to be. But tonight, she wasn't hiding behind a false identity or running from her past. Tonight, she was hunting. "Are you ready for this?" Adrian murmured, adjusting his cufflinks as they surveyed the crowd of New York's political and social elite. "I've been ready for 3 years," Elena replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. Across the ballroom, Victoria Ashford made her entrance with David Crawford at her side, both of them radiant with the confidence of people who believed they'd already won. Victoria wore white, a deliberate choice meant to symbolize her resurrection from the dead. David looked every inch the successful prosecutor, charming the room with the ease of a man who'd built his career on manipulating public opinion. Neither of them noticed the subtle positioning of federal agents throughout the ballroom, or the discreet cameras James had placed to capture every angle of what was about to unfold. "Ladies and gentlemen," District Attorney Robert Hayes took the podium, unaware that his evening was about to become historic. "Tonight we celebrate justice, the courage of witnesses who speak truth to power, and the partnerships that make our work possible." Elena felt Adrian's hand squeeze hers as the moment approached. "Before we begin our program," DA Hayes continued, "I'd like to recognize some special guests. Victoria Ashford, whose return from a terrible ordeal reminds us that truth always survives. David Crawford, whose dedication to protecting victims of financial crime has been extraordinary." The crowd applauded as Victoria and David acknowledged the recognition, basking in their carefully constructed public personas. "And," DA Hayes added, consulting his notes, "Adrian Kane and Elena Moreau, whose cooperation with federal authorities has led to breakthrough developments in prosecuting financial corruption." The applause died as confusion rippled through the crowd. Adrian Kane was supposed to be under federal investigation. Elena Moreau was supposed to be in psychiatric care. What were they doing here, and why were they being recognized as cooperating witnesses? Victoria's smile faltered as she met Elena's eyes across the ballroom. "Elena," Adrian said quietly, "it's time." Elena stepped forward, moving through the crowd with the poise her father had taught her, until she stood directly in front of Victoria and David. "Hello, Victoria," Elena said, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden hush. "You look wonderful for a dead woman." Victoria's mask of confusion was perfect. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "We do. Though the last time we spoke, you were explaining how you'd murdered my father and destroyed the man I love." Elena's smile was sharp as winter. "But I suppose 3 years of planning the perfect psychological manipulation can make one forgetful." The ballroom had gone completely silent. Cameras, both news crews and the hidden federal surveillance, captured every moment. "I think you must be confused." David stepped forward, his prosecutor's training kicking in. "Elena, sweetheart, you've been under a great deal of stress." "Have I?" Elena turned to face him, and David took an involuntary step back at the steel in her eyes. "David, tell everyone about the experimental memory therapy you paid for. The procedure's designed to erase my recollection of you murdering my father and replace it with false trauma about attempted suicide." "Elena," David's voice carried just the right note of concerned authority, "you're having an episode. These delusions are documented in medical records that federal investigators have been analyzing for the past week." Elena pulled out a tablet, swiping to display brain scans on the large screens positioned around the ballroom. "These are my brain scans from 8 months ago, showing clear evidence of artificially induced memory modification." The crowd gasped as the technical evidence filled the screens. Clear proof that Elena's memories had been chemically and psychologically altered. "And these," Elena continued, swiping to the next screen, "are the financial records showing David Crawford's payments to a private medical company specializing in memory reconstruction therapy." Victoria was no longer smiling. "This is obviously fabricated." "Is it?" Adrian stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. "Victoria, would you like to explain to everyone how you faked your death 3 years ago? Or shall I?" "Adrian, darling, I think your mental health struggles are affecting your judgment." "My mental health is fine," Adrian interrupted smoothly. "Unlike yours. Tell me, Victoria, how did it feel to spend 3 years planning the perfect revenge? To orchestrate an elaborate scheme to destroy not just my fortune, but my ability to trust, to love, to believe in human decency. Victoria's composure was cracking, her perfect mask slipping as she realized the trap closing around her. You see, Adrian continued, addressing the crowd but keeping his eyes on Victoria. My former fiancée died in a car accident 3 years ago. Except she didn't die. She staged her death to escape the consequences of her attempt to defraud me of half my fortune. That's insane, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Elena pulled up another screen. These are bank records showing Victoria Ashford transferring money to her accounts under the name Victoria Chen just 2 days after her supposed death. The crowd was riveted, watching a real-time exposure of criminal conspiracy playing out before their eyes. But the beautiful part, Adrian said, his voice carrying the dangerous calm that had made him billions, is that Victoria's plan was so elaborate, so well documented, that she created the evidence of her own crimes. James Freeman appeared from the crowd, carrying a briefcase that looked innocuous but contained 3 years of carefully gathered evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, James announced, I'm Agent Freeman, FBI. For the past 3 years, I've been conducting an undercover investigation into the murder of Senator Robert Moreau and the conspiracy to defraud Adrian Kane. The ballroom erupted in shocked murmurs as federal agents began moving through the crowd, positioning themselves around Victoria and David. Victoria Ashford, James continued, is alive and has been orchestrating a criminal enterprise involving murder, financial fraud, psychological manipulation, and witness intimidation. This is ridiculous, Victoria said, but her voice was shrill now, the polished confidence finally cracking. You can't prove any of this. Actually, we can, Elena said softly. Because you made one crucial mistake, Victoria. Which is? Elena smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, it was a smile of pure, triumphant joy. You assumed that everyone you were manipulating was actually being manipulated. Elena gestured to James, who opened his briefcase and pulled out a recording device. For 3 years, Elena explained, you thought James was your asset inside Adrian's security team. What you didn't know is that my father recruited James months before his death, specifically to investigate David's corruption and protect me from the consequences. Impossible, David snarled. James has been working for us since I told him to, Elena finished. Every conversation you had with him, every order you gave him, every detail of your plan, it was all recorded and transmitted to federal investigators. James pressed play on the recording device, and Victoria's voice filled the ballroom. Asterisk. The beautiful part is that Elena's psychological profile made her the perfect weapon against Adrian. A woman who genuinely believed she was in danger, who would naturally gravitate toward a powerful protector. Asterisk. The color drained from Victoria's face as her own words condemned her. But the recording I'm most proud of, Elena continued, is this one. Another audio file played, this time David's voice. Asterisk. Your father died because he discovered our operation. He found out about the network we'd been building. So we stopped him. A simple injection during his weekly doctor's visit. Mimicked a heart attack perfectly. Asterisk. The ballroom exploded into chaos. Federal agents moved in, surrounding Victoria and David as the crowd of political elites witnessed the confession to Senator Moreau's murder. Victoria Ashford and David Crawford, James announced formally. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, witness intimidation, and violation of federal racketeering statutes. But Victoria wasn't finished. As handcuffs clicked around her wrists, she looked directly at Elena with pure venom. You think you've won? Victoria snarled. Elena, darling, everything you remember about loving Adrian is still artificial. Even if you weren't programmed to feel it, how do you know it's real? How do you know you're not just trauma bonding with your captor? The words were designed to wound, to plant the final seed of doubt that would destroy Elena and Adrian's relationship even in victory. But Elena just smiled. Because of this, Elena said, pulling out her phone and showing Victoria a video message. On the screen, Senator Robert Moreau sat in his office just days before his death, looking directly into the camera. If you're watching this, Elena, then I'm gone and you're facing the hardest choice of your life. By now, you've met Adrian Kane. I chose him specifically, not as a random hiding place, but because he's exactly the kind of man worthy of my daughter's love. The crowd fell silent as Elena's father continued speaking from beyond the grave. Adrian Kane is a good man who's been broken by betrayal, just like you've been broken by loss. But broken things can be mended, sweetheart, and love is the strongest adhesive in the universe. Trust your heart. Trust his heart. And know that whatever you feel for each other is real, because real love is the only force strong enough to survive what you're both going through. Tears streamed down Elena's face as her father's final gift played for the world to see. I love you, Elena. Build a life worthy of the strength you've shown. And Adrian, if you're listening, thank you for protecting my daughter. Take care of each other. The video ended in absolute silence. Victoria stared at the phone, her face white with the realization that even her final psychological weapon had been anticipated and neutralized by a dead senator's love for his daughter. You see, Victoria, Elena said quietly, you spent 3 years trying to destroy love. But real love doesn't break. It just gets stronger. Adrian stepped to Elena's side, taking her hand as federal agents led Victoria and David away. Elena, Adrian said, his voice rough with emotion, your father was right about one thing. What's that? Broken things can be mended. Adrian pulled the engagement ring from his pocket. The same ring Elena had found in her father's safe, the ring that had proven their love was genuine from the beginning. Elena Morrow, will you marry me? Not because anyone planned it, not because it serves any purpose except love, but because I want to spend the rest of my life proving that your father was right about us. Elena looked around the ballroom, at the federal agents, at the crowd of witnesses, at the cameras broadcasting their moment to the world, and realized that this was exactly how it should be. Public, witnessed, permanent. Yes, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Yes, absolutely yes. As Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her in front of 500 witnesses, Elena felt the last of Victoria's poison leaving her system. Love, it turned out, really was the strongest force in the universe. And sometimes, just sometimes, it was enough to heal everything. If you've ever believed that love can overcome even the worst betrayals and manipulations, you're watching that belief proven true right now. Sometimes the best revenge is living well and loving fearlessly. Share in the comments what this story means to you. These connections help me create content that truly resonates. As Victoria and David were loaded into federal vehicles outside the Waldorf Astoria, Elena and Adrian stood together at the ballroom windows, watching justice finally being served. What happens now? Elena asked. Now, Adrian said, pulling her closer, we get to find out what normal people do when they're not fighting for their lives. And what do you think that is? Adrian smiled, the genuine smile that Elena had fallen in love with months ago. I think it involves a wedding, a honeymoon, and spending the rest of our lives making sure that what we've built together is strong enough to survive anything. Even if more enemies come? Especially if more enemies come, Adrian said. Because now they'll be facing not just Adrian Kane or Elena Morrow, but us. Together. As they held each other in the aftermath of their victory, neither of them knew that their story would become legendary. The billionaire and the senator's daughter, who proved that love could survive any manipulation, overcome any betrayal, and emerge stronger than ever. But they did know that tomorrow, for the first time in 3 years, they would wake up safe, free, and completely, genuinely in love. And that, they both agreed, was worth fighting for. 1 year later, Elena Kane stood in the same ballroom where her father had once hosted fundraisers for political causes. But tonight the gilded space was filled with a very different kind of hope. The Senator Robert Morrow Foundation for Justice, she announced to the gathered crowd of reporters, federal investigators, and victims' families, has successfully recovered over $200 million in stolen assets and helped prosecute 17 cases of corruption across 6 states. The applause was warm and genuine, nothing like the polite society clapping she remembered from her father's political events. These were people whose lives had been changed. Families who'd gotten justice, whistleblowers who'd found protection, victims who'd finally seen their attackers face consequences. Adrian watched from the side of the stage, his expression one of pure pride and love. The man who'd once isolated himself behind walls of wealth and suspicion now spent his days working alongside Elena to build something that would outlast them both. But tonight isn't just about the work we've accomplished, Elena continued, her hand instinctively moving to rest over the slight curve of her stomach. Tonight is about the future we're building, for justice, for truth, and for the next generation who will inherit the world we're fighting to improve. The crowd's reaction was immediate and joyful as they realized what Elena was announcing. Cameras flashed as Adrian joined her on stage, his arms sliding around her waist in the protective gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Elena and I, Adrian said, his voice carrying easily through the ballroom. Wanted to share this news with the people who've stood by us through the hardest fight of our lives. We're expecting our first child in the spring. The applause was thunderous, but Elena barely heard it. She was looking into Adrian's eyes, seeing the man who'd fought through 3 years of psychological manipulation to find his way back to love, who'd risked everything to protect her when she couldn't protect herself. Thank you, Elena said to the crowd, for believing that love and justice can coexist, that broken people can heal each other, and that sometimes the best revenge is building something beautiful. Later that evening, Elena and Adrian sat on the terrace of their new home. Not the fortress-like mansion where they'd first met, but a warm, welcoming house filled with light and laughter and the promise of family. Mrs. Kane, Adrian said, pulling Elena closer on the outdoor sofa where they watched the sunset paint Manhattan in shades of gold. Are you happy? Elena considered the question seriously, thinking about the woman she'd been a year ago, terrified, hiding, convinced that love was just another weapon people used against each other. I'm more than happy, she said finally. I'm whole. Even after everything we went through, the manipulation, the lies, the moment when we both thought our love was just another conspiracy. Elena turned in Adrian's arms, studying the face she'd learned to read like her favorite book. Especially after everything we went through. Adrian, what Victoria did to us, it wasn't just meant to destroy our love. It was meant to destroy our ability to love at all. And instead it proved that real love is the one thing that can't be faked or manufactured or manipulated. Elena placed her hand over Adrian's heart, feeling the steady rhythm that had become her anchor. We loved each other when we thought we were strangers. We chose each other when we thought we were enemies. We fought for each other when we thought we were betrayers. Adrian was quiet for a moment. Elena, do you ever wonder what would have happened if your father hadn't planned for us to meet? If James hadn't been protecting us? If the whole thing had been Victoria's manipulation with no countermeasures? Every day, Elena admitted. But then I remember something Dad used to say. The best plans are the ones that would work even if everything went wrong. Meaning Dad didn't arrange for us to meet and then hope we'd fall in love. He arranged for us to meet because he knew that if we were the people he believed us to be, love was inevitable. Elena smiled. Victoria's plan would have worked on 2 people who were just pretending to be good. But it couldn't work on 2 people who actually were good. And now we get to prove that love stories don't end with happily ever after. They begin with it. Elena's phone buzzed with a text that made her smile. Asterisk Elena, saw the news about the baby. James and I are so excited to be honorary uncle and aunt. The nursery furniture you ordered will be delivered next week. Dr. Morrison asterisk. Dr. Sarah Morrison had become one of Elena's closest friends after helping her escape psychiatric custody that terrible day. She'd also become James Freeman's wife 6 months ago, in a wedding where Elena had been matron of honor and Adrian had been James's best man. James texted too, Adrian said, showing Elena his phone. Asterisk sir, the security system for the nursery is installed and tested. Also, Mrs. Freeman wants to know if you're having a baby shower, because apparently I need to understand what that involves. Please advise, asterisk. Elena laughed, the sound carrying across their garden where the first spring flowers were beginning to bloom. Do you think James will ever stop calling you sir? Probably not. Do you think Dr. Morrison will ever stop psychoanalyzing our relationship? Definitely not. Elena settled back against Adrian's chest. But maybe that's good. Maybe having people who care enough to worry about us is exactly what we need. Speaking of people who care, Adrian said, I got a call from Victoria today. Elena stiffened. From prison. From her lawyer. She wants to see us. Claims she has information about other victims of the conspiracy, people she wants to make amends to before her trial. Do you believe her? Adrian was quiet for a long moment. I believe she's finally realized that destroying people for revenge doesn't actually make you feel better. I believe she's looking at life in prison and wondering if there's any way to find redemption. And what did you tell her lawyer? That we'd consider it. Together. As a family. Adrian's hand moved to rest over Elena's, both of them touching the place where their child was growing. Elena, I want our baby to grow up in a world where even the worst people have a chance to choose differently. Even Victoria? Especially Victoria. Because if she can find a way back to humanity after everything she's done, then maybe there's hope for everyone. Elena closed her eyes, thinking about forgiveness and redemption and the kind of world she wanted to raise her child in. Adrian, yeah, I love the man you've become. Not just the man you were before Victoria broke you. Not just the man you were when I met you, but the man you are right now. The one who's strong enough to consider forgiving someone who tried to destroy him. Elena, I'm only that man because of you. No, Elena said firmly. You're that man because you chose to be. Just like I chose to fight back instead of hiding forever. Just like we chose to trust each other even when everything seemed impossible. As the Manhattan skyline lit up around them, Elena and Adrian held each other in comfortable silence, both thinking about the journey that had brought them here. A year ago, Elena had been a terrified woman hiding behind a false name, convinced that love was just another way for people to hurt each other. A year ago, Adrian had been a bitter billionaire who'd given up on human connection, building walls around his heart that he'd thought were permanent. Now Elena was using her father's legacy to fight corruption and protect vulnerable people, while Adrian had transformed his business empire into a force for justice rather than just profit. They'd built something together that was stronger than either of them had been alone. A love story that had survived manipulation, betrayal, psychological warfare, and the systematic attempt to destroy their ability to trust. But more than that, they'd built a future worth fighting for. Elena, Adrian said quietly, are you ready for what comes next? With you? I'm ready for anything. Even if there are more enemies? More people who want to use our happiness against us. Elena smiled, thinking about the foundation they'd built, the network of allies they'd gathered, the strength they'd found in each other, and the family they were creating. Let them come, she said. Adrian, we've proven that love can survive anything. Now let's prove that it can overcome everything. As they sat together watching their city sparkle in the darkness, Elena felt her baby move for the first time. A flutter of life that carried the promise of new beginnings, second chances, and love that would endure for generations. Victoria Ashford had tried to prove that love was just another weapon. Instead, Elena and Adrian had proven that love was the strongest force in the universe. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to heal the world. Hey beautiful souls, we've come to the end of Elena and Adrian's incredible journey together. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe in the power of love to overcome even the worst betrayals and manipulations, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Share what this story meant to you. Tell me about your own experiences with trust and forgiveness, or just let me know which moment made you believe in their love. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button because next week, we're diving into another story that will show you just how powerful one person's choice to fight for love can be. Stories like these remind us that no matter how broken we feel, no matter how much we've been hurt, we all deserve love that sees our worth and fights for our happiness. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you think, braver than you know, and worthy of love that celebrates who you are instead of trying to change you. Keep believing in the power of your own story, because the best chapters are still ahead.